All right, we are on the air, and it is time for the Week 7 preview here in the Sports Room Talk Show. I am your host, Unger to the Max, and the man to my right is Cody Felger from Bring the Juice Colts podcast. We talked back in 2020 when the Colts came to Cleveland, and surprisingly, the Browns won. Why do I say surprisingly? Is because prior to that game, you guys had won 3 straight games against us.
Yeah, man, good to be back on. We were just talking off air how, man, the changes from 2020 to 2023, whether it's new head coach, new quarterback, all those different things. And it's crazy what a difference 3 years can make and kind of the outlooks of the team from where they were in 2020 to now. It's crazy.
Yeah. When I saw this game on the schedule, I was thinking it's going to be Deshaun Watson against Anthony Richardson, Jonathan Taylor against Nick Chubb, and you would have all those great matchups. And the injury gods or the sports gods, whichever one you want to say, came in and said, yeah, no, you're not going to get that. Instead, it's Deshaun Watson against Gardner Minshew, or at least we think it's going to be Deshaun Watson based on the fact that he has been practicing today, and I think he practiced yesterday as well.
Yeah, and then the same with Anthony Richardson. I mean, you thought this dude, is just going to continue to get better as the season went on, and here we are. Although the Colts do have Jonathan Taylor back, which is good news. He's been back this will be his third straight week back. It's just a different outlook without Anthony Richardson out there, and so Gardner Minshew, for as good as he can be as one of the best backups in the league, and I'm sure we'll get into this. You're just not the same offensively as you would be with Anthony Richardson, obviously. So, yeah, definitely a little bit of a bummer that he's wasn't able to finish the season. But, yeah, overall, it still should be a pretty good game, though.
Yeah, my biggest concern when it comes to this is, the Browns get arguably the biggest win of the season by taking down the San Francisco 49ers last week, 19-17 here in Cleveland. So I'm worried that, not that they're going to overlook the Colts necessarily, but they're going to be riding such a high from that 49er game that they're going to be emotionally deprived, I think that's the right word, going into this game. Not fully there.
Yeah. Yeah, no, for sure. And that was obviously a very impressive win against probably the best team in the NFC right now. Them or Philadelphia, it's really a coin flip. But, I mean, Philadelphia has not looked great at times either. So, yeah, I definitely think that was a huge win for them. And, again, I guess one of the things I'm curious about, just because he's missed so much time, you mentioned him already, Deshaun Watson. How does he look in this game? Does he look a little rusty? Is he shaking off some of that stuff a little bit from missing? Gosh, how many games was it? Like 3-4 games? It seems like a long time he was out.
Yeah, so he was out for the Baltimore game. Then we had our bye week, and then he was out for the game against San Francisco.
Okay, so 3 weeks, 2 games. He hasn't been playing. So, okay. But yeah, I am just kind of curious. Is there any rust to knock off for him? That would be my biggest question. It feels like there always is in some way with coming back from something where you haven't done it for a little bit of time. But yeah, Cleveland, I tell you what, man, that's a very impressive win against San Francisco, who's frankly just been dominating teams. And the fact that the Browns were able to do what they were able to do, that's exciting. That's definitely really cool that they were able to really hold San Francisco in check the majority of the game and ultimately come out on top. That should go huge for this team's confidence moving forward. That's for sure.
Yeah. And I was kind of saying the same thing last week for San Francisco, actually, because, the week prior, they were caught up in all the hoopla, hype, pomp, and circumstance, whatever, going into their Sunday night football game against Dallas. And so I was thinking, okay, well, they come off that. I know they completely dominated, but still. And then they have a 10 a.m. start time for them in Cleveland. So my whole thinking was, okay, maybe they're not mentally there. So that's kind of where I got this idea about the Browns. I don't think Stefanski's going to allow that to happen, especially the way the defense has been playing. the defense has been playing at a historic level, but still, like, there is that concern for me.
Sure. Yeah, you'll have that about every time. For sure. I definitely get that. I will say that Indianapolis, speaking of kind of, coming off of momentum and stuff, Indianapolis before last week, you're feeling pretty good about where they were, all things considered, even though Richardson did get hurt, they just came off a big divisional win against Tennessee, had a chance to take the lead in the AFC South. And I honestly thought coming into that game, like they were going to put up a better fight than they did. But I think what you saw is they got off to a really poor start early. That game goes from a 3-0 game where you're leading to all of a sudden 14-3. Momentum just completely swings in the opposite direction. And then by that time, it's kind of too little too late. They tried to make a little bit of a comeback. But again, it's Gardner Minshew. It's not Anthony Richardson. So what you saw against the Rams, that wasn't probably going to happen with the quarterback of his limitations. And so all that to say, Indianapolis has been pretty competitive most of the year. And I'd say even in their losses, you can probably say like they've looked pretty good for a team that was a lot of people pegged 3-4 wins. They've looked pretty good. But I thought against Jacksonville, they've always struggled down there. But I thought even especially they looked poor. That was probably their worst performance. So, I do kind of wonder how do they respond from kind of laying an egg, honestly, down in Jacksonville, a place where, we all knew what kind of the narrative was going down there. Can't win in Jacksonville. They don't look like themselves down there. For whatever reason, that's kind of been their kryptonite the last really 10 years going down there. So I do kind of wonder how Shane Steichen and this crew's going to, and how this team's going to respond after honestly kind of an embarrassing showing from what they've shown, the previous few weeks. And so I expect this team to come out pretty motivated, pretty ready to go in this game, especially like on the defensive side, because the defense, I thought they played pretty well, but they definitely had some silly moments where you're like some miscues and stuff. But they did a really good job. When you look at just the pure stats standpoint, they did a pretty good job holding really the Jaguars in check. It was more of just the situational stuff and the momentum swings that kind of changed that game a week ago. So I am just kind of curious how they respond kind of off of their worst week so far this year.
Yeah. I mean, you mentioned it. You guys, for some reason, struggle when you go down to Duval County to play the Jaguars. I'm not sure what the reason is. It's kind of like us when we go to Pittsburgh. We can't seem to win no matter what when we play the Steelers in Pittsburgh. But, we kind of talked about this earlier with Anthony Richardson, but I thought him and Shane Steichen were kind of finding their groove and really starting to fit together. It seemed like Steichen was trying to put in a similar offense to what he had with Jalen Hurts in Philadelphia. So it feels like he's having to pivot to what Gardner Minshew can do. And at least from my observation, certainly correct me if I'm wrong, but it feels like him and Minshew aren't quite on the same page. Does it feel that way to you as well, or?
Yeah, I think you are right. In fact, you have to completely change your playbook. You have to cut down so many things that Richardson could do that Minshew, frankly, just physically can't do and never will be able to do. It is interesting. The one thing is like, the two games that Minshew came in relief of Richardson, he actually played extremely well in both those games. But the two games that teams had to prepare for him were two of his worst games he's played. The Baltimore game, Minshew was pretty bad in that game, to be honest. Like he was all right. But like, you definitely were like, we miss Anthony Richardson in that game. And you think he probably could have won by a lot more if you had him in that game. And then obviously last week against Jacksonville, where it was just a weird thing where, I can't even blame Shane Steichen for that because Minshew quite literally threw up like two ducks in a row. It was weird. It's like the offense would get going. Then Minshew would decide, I don't want to finish this drive. And he would just chuck it 10 yards past his receiver. And there's a wide open defender there, and so I don't know what it was with Minshew. It was very much like, what is wrong with it? Like, why is he playing like one of the worst backups? Like, we say he's one of the best backups, but that was one of his worst games I've ever seen him play. And you're just like, I don't know. Like, I get it. Sometimes you make mistakes. Everybody makes mistakes when it comes to playing. but like that was just egregious. He had, multiple times where he turned the ball over where you're like, come on, man, like that just has no place here. So I'm hoping that they figure it out. I guess the good thing is with that is, they know each other extremely well from their time in Philadelphia the last couple of years. So maybe they can get some stuff going, some stuff formulated. But yeah, I'm not very confident in Minshew's ability right now, and his ability to kind of lead this offense and guide them, to win games and stuff like that, especially now, because what we've seen from the small sample size when he's gotten an opportunity to play the full game, it really hasn't been good. And, you think about, and I know you talked about the defense, like what Cleveland's been able to do this year, it's scary. It's very scary. And the fact the Colts are going to be down an offensive lineman who will probably likely be playing against Myles Garrett, that even terrifies me more. So, yeah, I don't expect a whole lot from this offense, especially in the passing game. I'll say that.
Yeah. I mean, you guys are going to be very run heavy, I feel like, with Jonathan Taylor and Zach Moss, who Zach Moss has played really well. So it kind of surprised me when it was announced that Jonathan Taylor was getting a contract extension. Not that he didn't deserve it, because he certainly did, but given the way Zach Moss has been playing this season, that's why it caught me off guard.
Sure. Yeah, no, he's kind of come out of nowhere, and he kind of went back to reality a little bit. Everybody kind of did last week, but yeah, he has just been just kind of a revelation running the football. It's kind of been crazy. Like, Zach Moss, former 3rd round pick of Buffalo. The Colts kind of got just thrown into that Nyheim Hines trade midseason last year. You're like, okay, this is a guy that kind of flamed out in Buffalo, didn't really work out. Certainly has some sort of talent, but again, you just don't know. But, the fact that when Taylor was hurt last year, Zach Moss got some run, I think that definitely kind of helped his confidence. And then this year, yeah, with Taylor missing a good chunk of the games early on, he just runs so hard. Zach Moss he's not going to be that guy that dances in the backfield. When he sees a hole, he hits it, right? And I guess the thing with both these running backs is I think there's a world, and we're kind of seeing it a little bit, where the two can coexist together and be very effective. Zach Moss, obviously he's a bigger running back. He's, kind of just a power guy in there. Jonathan Taylor can do a little bit of everything. He's got that elite speed that you're looking for, but also Zach Moss, if you look in that Tennessee game, he can run it. He can outrun some guys. So I think it's a good complement of backs right there. And I would argue I'd probably put him up against just about anybody right now with how well they've both been playing. And we know Taylor's not even back to his full workload yet. So when he gets that, I think he'll start to see a little bit more in that department. But yeah, I think that if there is a point in the offense that Cleveland needs to slow down, it's going to be that running game, because both these backs, have the opportunity and have the ability to really make you pay, when it matters. And also they have the ability to run, to run 20, 30 times, and be fine. We've seen Zach Moss in this season has multiple games where he's had 20 to 30 carries and been just fine. We've seen Taylor have that in the past. So yeah, it's going to be interesting. They're not fully acclimated yet, I don't think. So I'm interested to see as the season goes on, what does that carry, what's that look like when it comes to that? And how can both these guys maybe help each other and really help the team running the football and being effective? So I'm really intrigued to see how they continue to do that. But yeah, now without really the threat of the vertical passing game, honestly, that's what we saw Jacksonville do. They just kept so many guys in the box because they knew Gardner Minshew couldn't beat him over the top. And so I think that's kind of the key to Cleveland's success, is just if they stack the box, they're going to have a good chance in this game to slow down Indianapolis offensively.
I mean, I do like your complement of wide receivers. You've got Michael Pittman out there. You've got, I think it's Alec Pierce, if I remember correctly. So you do have a good complement of wide receivers.
Yeah, I want to throw out Josh Downs as well, because he has been really good. The 3rd round receiver this year out of North Carolina. I think he's 3rd right now in terms of receiving amongst rookies. So he has played really well. He came off a couple weeks ago, his best performance, nearly 100 yards. He's kind of been a volume guy. He's always kind of been that. Where at North Carolina, he had right around 100 catches each year. And so he's been one of those guys that's just continued to find ways to get open. He's more of that small, really good route runner, kind of in the T.Y. Hilton mold, sort of, that kind of guy where he's never going to beat anybody physically. Like he's not a 6'5" receiver that's going to go over the top, but he just finds ways to get open. So he's definitely a guy in the slot that I think has a lot of potential there and is very dangerous. Now, again, can the Colts get the ball in his hands? That's the biggest question. But if they can, I think he's a guy to watch out for. You will see on Alec Pierce, he did sustain an injury in that Jacksonville game. His status is kind of up in the air, so we'll see. I could foresee them, potentially, promoting somebody like a KJ Hamler, who's on the practice squad, who we know has talent. He just had some injuries and stuff, still very young, or Amari Rodgers or somebody like that, But yeah, Pittman's a good receiver. Everybody, I feel like a lot of people maybe don't give him the credit he deserves with all the different quarterbacks he's played with, and the fact that he has just been consistent. I don't think he's, a top 10 receiver, but I think he's always been a solid, fringe number one receiver. And I think a lot of people kind of disrespect him a lot of times. So yeah, I do think the Colts have a nice complement of receiving targets. The big one in this game for the tight end, Kylan Granson, will not be in this game. He suffered a concussion last week, so he's out of this game. So it'll be probably a good dose of Andrew Ogletree, who is a second-year tight end who's had some nice moments this year. Mawali Cox, who you guys probably know, he was on the Colts in 2020 when they played Cleveland. And then probably rookie Will Mallory as well. He's kind of been bouncing between practice squad and active roster. And with how many tight ends the Colts have had, he's kind of just been when needed, he'll be called up. So he'll probably be, I could see him being called up today or something like that and playing because he has some ability. He's shown some things this year too. So I don't think the Colts necessarily have that guy, necessarily at wide receiver, but they have a lot of nice options right now that they could turn to if needed. And they like to spread the ball around a lot. That's what Shane Steichen likes to do, So Pittman will probably he's typically gotten the most amount of receptions and the most amount of targets. He's kind of been that number one guy. So whoever I guess it would be Denzel Ward. He'll probably be matched up on Pittman all day long. But
yeah, that would be my guess.
Yeah. So the Colts don't have that, number one wide receiver right now that's like, okay, this guy's a game changer necessarily, but they do have some guys that can really do some damage if you don't account for them.
Yeah, I kind of feel the same way about the Browns offense. Amari Cooper, he certainly has the potential to be a number one wide receiver, but I don't feel like he has definitively taken on that role. I like Donovan Peoples-Jones, obviously, and we do have two capable tight ends with David Njoku and Harrison Bryant, but it's kind of the same way you were just talking about the Colts offense, where you don't have that definitive game changer, like the guy that gets the red pen treatment, where you have to circle this guy, I would say Amari Cooper is the closest guy to that, but I wouldn't definitively say, he's the number one wide receiver and all that. But you were talking about your running backs earlier. It's interesting how you guys have like kind of a defined running back duo, whereas I feel with the Browns, obviously it was supposed to be Nick Chubb and Jerome Ford, but we all know what happened in the Pittsburgh game, and Nick Chubb is done for the season. So we had to bring Kareem Hunt back in. And yet, even though Kareem Hunt is more familiar with this offense, given that, we're the last team he played for, it still feels like we're using Jerome Ford more. And he's in his second year. We drafted him out of the University of Cincinnati. And I like him, but it feels like we're still trying to figure out like how to use our running backs. Whereas, like you were saying earlier, it feels like the Colts know how to use Jonathan Taylor and Zach Moss.
Yeah, for sure. That's something that Shane Steichen, showed his ability last year in Philadelphia to do, that running back by committee. And that was without, that was with Miles Sanders as his number one guy. So, like, obviously he has an upgrade with Jonathan Taylor and Zach Moss. So, yeah, he's shown that ability in the past to kind of utilize these guys in the special ways. It is a bummer that Evan Hall, the rookie that they had, he kind of got hurt early on in the season. He would have been more of that kind of receiving back, that guy that they would have used out of the backfield a little bit more, but they're going to miss him this year. But yeah, I think Shane Steichen has a good kind of, and I guess it's good for him to have kind of two guys that have proven a little bit, so he can kind of figure out, okay, what are the ways I want to utilize these guys, keep this offense dangerous, and keep the defense guessing in a lot of ways. And it definitely does, like I mentioned, it hurts your ability to be more or less predictable and more creative with a kind of more not mobile quarterback in Gardner Minshew. And kind of what we saw last year with the Colts was they didn't have a quarterback that could push the ball down the field. They just didn't have that last year. And Minshew doesn't have that ability really either. I don't think it was as bad as it was last year, but I still think it's like he's a backup for a reason. He's on his third team in so many years for a reason. And so it's just, it's not great with Gardner Minshew right now. I mean, he can be efficient, but I think what you'll see is a lot of those short to intermediate passes, not a ton of shots down the field. When they do, not really likely to be completed a whole lot. At least that's what we saw last week. And Jacksonville didn't really have a good pass defense at all, and the Colts weren't able to do a whole lot down the field. So, but when it goes back to the running game, I think they definitely have two guys that they know how to utilize. It'll be interesting to see, when is Jonathan Taylor 100% like getting the reps? When does Shane Steichen feel like he's fully back? Like he may be physically back, like, and everything, but like, when is he fully back into being the number one guy, if that makes sense? So
yeah, it totally makes sense.
Yeah, so that'll be interesting. The Colts are obviously being cautious with him for a reason, and then that's fine. But yeah, I think he does have a great, if there's any coach that I think knows how to kind of handle multiple talented backs in the backfield, I think it's Shane Steichen.
Yeah. Like I said earlier, Deshaun Watson has been practicing, and it sounds like he will play on Sunday. He was taking first team reps, but there is still a chance we could see PJ Walker back out on the field again, which you guys are very familiar with PJ Walker. He was on your practice squad, I believe.
Yes, he was. He played a couple preseason years with Indy. Yep.
Yes. I mean, actually, you're familiar with either quarterback we start on Sunday, because Deshaun Watson was obviously in your division with the Houston Texans. But this could potentially be a battle of backup quarterbacks if it's PJ Walker that plays. And, he did play well against San Francisco. He had like the one big throw to Amari Cooper, but it's kind of the same thing you were talking about with Gardner Minshew, where it's going to be those short intermediate throws where it seems like PJ Walker is better equipped. One guy I did forget with our wide receiver core earlier, David Bell. I think we got him out of Purdue, so maybe he could play a factor in this game if by chance Indy decides to double Amari Cooper. So PJ Walker or Deshaun Watson have to go to plan B. That could be David Bell, possibly.
Yeah. I think it potentially could be a very defensive battle. I could see it being one of those really kind of grinded out, low scoring games in this one, especially if Watson's not able to go. And even so, I don't know what your opinion is, but I feel like he's been underwhelming since he's come to Cleveland. I feel like there hasn't been like, he, for as much as you guys gave up, you probably expect a little bit more out of him.
I mean, it's hard to say with last year, given that he was dealing with all of his off-field stuff and, all that went along with it. And then he has that 11-game suspension and comes back for the game in Houston, which the NFL can deny it all they want. They intentionally did that because they wanted his first game to be against his former team in Houston. But, yeah, he didn't play that great to finish last season. And then, he played well against Tennessee in week 3. Didn't look great against the Steelers in week 2. And our defense just carried us against Cincinnati in week 1. But for some reason, we just own Joe Burrow and the Bengals. I mean, Joe Burrow has never beaten the Browns in Cleveland in his career, which is highly unusual because he only has, I think, one loss against Patrick Mahomes, which obviously was last year's AFC Championship game. But it's pretty interesting to me that, the Browns can be that good against Joe Burrow, and then he turns around and he's amazing against arguably the best team in the AFC.
So very, very sporadic, very, very hot and cold with Deshaun Watson, huh?
Yeah, because, like I said, he comes in at following the suspension, and I thought he played well against Washington late in the season. Had some other games where it's like, what are you doing? And then, I thought he played decently in week 1 this season against Cincinnati, but not great. And then, played like a 5 out of 10, I would say, against Pittsburgh in week 2. And then, Tennessee, we just kind of did whatever we wanted because the Titans just could not stop us.
Mm-hmm. Gotcha.
And then we had to go to Dorian Thompson-Robinson in week 4 against Baltimore, and, well, we saw how well that turned out.
Right.
Not well.
No.
But looking at the defensive side of the ball, I know you still have. Does he go by Darius Leonard or Shaq Leonard now?
Shaq Leonard, because that's actually his legitimate name, I think, or something. But everybody just called him Darius, and then a couple years ago, or I think actually beginning of last year, he's like, yeah, it's actually Shaquille. So we, whatever you want to call him, Darius Shaquille Leonard, Shaquille Leonard, Shaq Leonard, it don't matter. I think he's fine with whatever. Even if people call him Darius Leonard, I think he's fine with it. But
okay. So I know, I would say he's your best defender.
Well, I would push back on that this year,
okay.
actually. He is not, and I know he's still, he missed a lot of last year with some injuries and stuff. This year, he has not been. He has not been the best player. Yeah, even the best linebacker. I would probably throw that out to Zaire Franklin, the former 7th-round pick. He is leading the NFL in tackles right now, and he has just been, next level. He had an opportunity last year when Shaq was dealing with some of the injuries. He had an opportunity, and he led the team in tackles, and he took that a step further, and he has really, come on and played extremely well at linebacker. And so, honestly, I would probably say at least this year, and again, things can change. I think he had probably his best performance against Jacksonville of the season, and he's starting to ramp things up to maybe full, getting back. But I would say right now, through 6-7 games, Shaq Leonard's probably been the 3rd best linebacker on the team.
Wow. For us, I would definitely say JOK has been our best linebacker. I'd like to see a little bit more from Sione Takitaki. One, because I think he has it in him to be a really good linebacker. But 2, I just really like saying his last name. I think it's fun. And don't ask me why I started doing this, but whenever he makes a really big play, I always say, I want a Taki Taco. I have no idea what a Taki Taco is. I'll have to, I guess, go in my kitchen and make it.
Yeah,
and
I'm a big Taki fan, so that sounds really good right now. Taki Taco.
No, it's Taki Taco.
With 2 Takis. Okay.
All right. Yes, because his last name is Taki. So I'm like, okay. But, I really like our secondary. Obviously, everybody talks about our defensive line, and rightfully so, with Myles Garrett, Zadarius Smith. Dalvin Tomlinson played a huge role in the game last week against San Francisco. But I look at our secondary, Juan Thornhill, Denzel Ward, Grant Delpit when he stays healthy, Greg Newsome. How do you throw on them? I mean, you were talking about earlier how, you don't fully trust Gardner Minshew, and your wide receiver core is, a C+, At least that's the way I was hearing you say it. Correct me if I'm wrong. But to me, that it sounds like that favors the Browns.
Oh yeah, I would say so. And again, like the Colts offensive line's been playing pretty well this year. I think they've had a nice bounce back year, but it feels like just there's always that one injury, that keeps them from being fully healthy. They missed Bernard Ryman for a couple weeks, and then all of a sudden, when he gets back, Braden Smith is out, last week, and he's going to be out this week. And so it just doesn't seem like they can be fully healthy. But when they can, I think they have a chance to really run it on anybody and protect pretty well. But that is the biggest thing that I'm terrified of is it'll be Blake Freeland, the rookie, up against Myles Garrett for probably the good majority of this game. And that is the biggest thing that I'm worried about is just, how, Myles Garrett's already a game wrecker as it is. How much more is he going to be against a kid who's making his, third, fourth start of his career? And so that is definitely something I'm concerned about. And then also, just your secondary, like you mentioned. I mean, I don't really see a huge weakness in your defense. Defense has been that good this year. And so trying to throw the football is going to be extremely difficult for this team. And I don't really see them doing a whole lot of that, to be honest with you. I don't really know where they're going to have an opportunity to really take advantage in this game. If they weren't able to do it against Jacksonville, who has one of the worst pass defenses, it's going to be tough. It's going to be tough. That's all I'm going to say. So I don't really expect a whole lot, honestly, from this Colts offense.
Yeah. I feel like we can score about 20 in this game, I would say. I don't think it's going to be a high-scoring affair based on what you're saying. Yeah, I don't think it's going to be like a 30-20 type game. I would expect more like maybe not quite what we saw last week, that low scoring, but maybe like a 24-20 type of game.
Yeah, probably a little bit more low scoring, I would say as well. Yeah, just after what I saw from the Colts last week, it's hard for me to pick them to do a whole lot offensively, to be completely honest with you, because I feel like they had their opportunities, but they kind of just flushed them away, honestly, in that Jacksonville game. Now, hopefully, Gardner Minshew has a bounce back game in this game. I'm hoping that this is his first kind of, all right, he's better than he was a week ago, because Colts threw away so many points by just being reckless with the football. They had opportunities in the red zone they didn't convert, stuff like that, where you're like, gosh, that could have been a 14, 21 point swing if you were just smart and not careless with the football. So again, I don't know. But I think it will come down. Honestly, it just could come down to some field goal kicking, which I think I don't actually know. Who is your guys' kicker at this point? I honestly have lost track.
It's Dustin Hopkins.
Oh, okay. Dustin Hopkins. How has he been this year?
He made some key field goals for us last week against San Francisco.
Okay.
But I'm glad we got rid of Cade York, because there were too many times where it's like, okay, this is a makeable field goal. It would be a big difference in this game for us. And he would just yeet it to the left or right. And you're just like, oh my God.
Well, yeah, we understand that as Colts people. We understand that very well, going from Rodrigo Blankenship, who couldn't hit the broadside of a barn, to Matt Gay this year, who has been one of the best kickers and still is one of the best kickers in football. The Colts go out in free agency and they spend money on a kicker, and people are like losing their minds. And I'm like, I'm good with it, man. We've seen too many times where the Colts have been in close games and their kicker's just blown it. So, yeah, that's good. That sounds like it'll be maybe one of those games potentially in Cleveland or against Cleveland here. And, just one of those kind of back and forth defensive battles. Field position is going to be important in this game. I could definitely see it coming down to that.
Yeah. I mean, it's not like Adam Vinatieri and Phil Dawson, two of the greatest kickers in NFL history, are going to walk through the door.
Right.
So, which it was so much fun watching Adam Vinatieri kick when he was with the Colts.
Mm-hmm.
You knew, basically every time he went out on the field, he was going to make it. Yeah. I will say this. You guys have had, two of my all-time favorite players. Reggie Wayne. I'm a huge Reggie Wayne fan. And, of course, Peyton Manning. But I also love Dwight Freeney.
Mm-hmm.
Um, wasn't I'm not no disrespect to Edgerrin James, but I wasn't a huge fan of him. I think that's because I tend to lean more towards the wide receivers a little bit more.
Sure.
Uh, that said, my two favorite players all time are actually running backs, LaDainian Tomlinson and Maurice Jones-Drew. But
Mm.
I don't know. There was just something about Reggie Wayne that I'm like, okay, this guy is great. And I'm like, okay, anytime there's a Colts game on, I want to watch because I want to see what number 87 is going to do.
Yeah, right. Yeah, he was incredible. They had a long line of really, really good receivers, like back to back to back with Marvin, Reggie, and then Ty for a number of years. And so they're kind of looking for that number one guy again, And so obviously, for nostalgia's sake, it would be amazing to get Marvin Harrison Jr. in the draft. That would be incredible. But there's no way they're going to be that bad to get him, especially with teams like Chicago and Carolina already losing 5-6 games already.
Right.
It's just like, shoot, that's a bummer because I would love to have him on this roster. And the Colts really need a number one guy, like a legit, like number one, like top 5 receiver. I think that's the biggest thing their offense is missing right now. I know we're getting off track a little bit, but
no, you're fine.
Like that would be, I think that's the thing they got to target next year, to be completely honest with you. And I know there's people are saying target a quarterback. And I'm like, I'm not giving up on a 21-year-old quarterback. They got hurt 1 year.
I wouldn't. I really like what you've got with Anthony Richardson. Yeah. It was just, unfortunate, but I would not give up on him. I think he's got so much potential. I mean, Shane Steichen with him I think it's the perfect pairing because we were just talking about this earlier. Shane Steichen, where was he last year? Coaching Jalen Hurts.
Right.
Jalen Hurts and Anthony Richardson, they play a very similar style. So if Anthony Richardson can actually stay healthy, you've got something with Richardson.
Yep. And so, like, the reason I would want a receiver so bad or just some sort of weapons, I am a firm believer, and we've seen this with different teams who have had success with their young quarterbacks, is
right.
Once you get your guy, you do everything you can to build around him. So you get him offensive linemen, you get him receivers, you get him the running game. Like you support him as much as you can. So, okay, yeah, the Colts might have, the last couple of years, they've invested some picks into receivers. Go more. I'm always for more weapons. I firmly don't believe that you can have too much talent at wide receiver or tight end. So I'm a big believer in getting Anthony Richardson as much help as you can next year. And if he can stay healthy, you're right. Like if he can build with some of these young receivers, like there's a lot of good receivers coming into this draft next year. So I think if the Colts, depending where they fall, now again, I don't know what their season's going to look like now with Gardner Minshew. I'm kind of torn. It's like you're 3-3. Do you keep winning? Obviously, fans want everybody, they want the team to try to win and make the playoffs. But do you want the Colts to win 7-8 games, or do you want them to win 4 or 5 games? And then all of a sudden you're in play for one of those elite guys, in the top 10. So I'm kind of torn on that. Like I see both sides of it. I'll never root for the team to lose, but in terms of the building philosophy, I'm like, hey, as much talent as you can get around this guy, do it.
I mean, that's been one of my biggest issues with the Browns in general. Not necessarily the talent part of it that you were just talking about, but, it felt like when Anthony Richardson was healthy, the Colts were kind of forming their offense around his skill set and what he could do well.
Yeah.
The Browns have been very stubborn when it comes to that. They've drafted a number of quarterbacks and they've brought in a number of quarterbacks via free agency and trades and whatnot, and instead of trying to create an offense that fits what that quarterback's skill set is, they just say, nope, we're adding this quarterback and we're putting you in this offense. And it doesn't matter if your skill set fits or not. And I'm like, that makes no sense. Like when I go back to like Colt McCoy, for example, when we drafted him out of the University of Texas, I liked him. And I thought, okay, maybe he could be our quarterback of the future. but it never felt like the Browns really, tried to get their offense to work around what Colt McCoy could do, or, Cody Kessler, Baker Mayfield. There's a number of examples I could point to, and it's all the same thing. Whereas with you guys, when you had Andrew Luck, you kind of developed your offense around what Andrew Luck could do, which it was kind of hard to see that though, because your offensive line just,
Yeah.
was like a turnstile where defenders were like, "Oh, I get a turn at Andrew Luck, and I get a turn," and
Yeah.
you
Yeah.
know,
That was not the way to build around a young quarterback. That was not.
no, but you get what I'm trying to say, though.
Yeah, for sure. Yep. So I'm excited for the future. It's just kind of like a damper on this season because you would like, with the guy that was the biggest thing for Richardson all year was the guy just needs reps. He just needs to be on the field and he needs to just develop. And I honestly thought, and I know we talked about this earlier, when he was on the field, I was shocked at how developed he was. Like, I thought he was going to need a lot more time. I thought it was going to be one of those situations where you're like, the dude's going to be pretty bad year one. Like, that was kind of what we thought potentially. But I thought he looked pretty solid. He still has things, that he needs to clean up. But I thought development-wise as a quarterback, he was further ahead than I think a lot of people initially thought he was.
Yeah, for sure. Um, you got some good pieces around him, but just keep adding to it. And you guys can be like a playoff contender. Obviously not this season, but maybe next season. You never know.
Yep, exactly. Yeah, we'll never know. You never know what can happen. And, the season's still pretty young at this point. So a lot can happen between now and I guess the end of the year. But yeah, right now I just don't know how to feel about this team. Like, they have talent, but also it's like, we saw with Cincinnati, when Joe Burrow went down his rookie year, they were a 2-3 win football team. And then they go from that to a playoff contender and a Super Bowl contender pretty soon after that. So a lot can change, but it definitely is a bummer without your franchise guy.
Yeah, it definitely is. And for sure, some of the air has been taken out of the balloon because I was hoping to see Jonathan Taylor against Nick Chubb and who's the better running back. Same kind of thing when we played Tennessee earlier. I was hoping to see Derrick Henry against Nick Chubb and kind of settle that running back debate. But,
Yeah.
it's going to be an interesting game on Sunday. Um, I'll be interested to see how the Browns, are mentally, given what I said earlier about you get this huge win against San Francisco, and now you have to go on the road to play a 3-3 Colts team that's on their backup quarterback that just got trounced by the Jaguars in their last game. Like, how the Browns adjust, you know.
Yeah.
And then next week we have to go to Seattle, which it's never easy to win there. So, this is an interesting 2-game road trip for us.
Yeah, no, for sure. And then we have to go play New Orleans as well, which will be an interesting one, because New Orleans hasn't looked great this year. So, they just lost last night to Jacksonville. So, yeah, it's going to be interesting to see kind of how this season plays out. I do think the Colts, at least from a coaching standpoint, they are better than they were last year. And I think Shane Steichen has proven that he is, more of a competent head coach than the Colts had with Frank Reich. As much as Frank Reich was a great person, I just think the Colts looked a lot, except for last week, of course. I think they've looked a lot more prepared. They've looked a lot more competitive. And I think that's going to keep them in some games. So even if the Colts don't win this game, I would say the good thing about them is never count them out, because I think they always have a chance to win. I think the coaching staff definitely helps with that and kind of getting their players prepared. And, Indianapolis isn't fully healthy in this game, but they still have some nice pieces. They still can be dangerous if they are not accounted for. So still have DeForest Buckner, who has just been one of those guys. Grover Stewart's definitely a huge loss. He got suspended. He's out for 6 games, which is a big bummer. So potentially there's some opportunity to run the football there, because that's definitely a huge loss. They do have a nice young rookie corner that I really like, Julius Brent, who they took this year. He's a big physical corner, 6'2". He's played pretty well. He got his first interception a week ago against Jacksonville. He's really been playing good. So at least the Colts have one corner. They did a lot of overhaul in their defense, especially in the secondary. And so they're pretty young right now, and they definitely can be, taken advantage of. But I think Julius Brents is definitely a guy that's on the up and up. So he would probably say, I'd probably say if there's one guy in the secondary to watch for, it's probably him.
All right, sounds good. So I'm the kind of fan where if I don't think the Browns are going to win a game, I'm not going to pick them. But in this case, I do think the Browns improved their record of 4-2. I'll say I think we beat you by a touchdown, 24-17.
Okay. Yeah, it's hard for me to pick the Colts offense, but again, I say that and they'll probably come out and look completely different than they did a week ago. So I think the Cleveland will win. It's just hard for me to say the Colts will be able to really do a whole lot against this Cleveland defense that's been on a historic pace. It's been just so good.
Yeah, Jim Schwartz has been the perfect addition for us defensively.
Yeah, there's so much talent on that side of the ball for you guys. And so I think it is a low-scoring game. I'm actually going to go 20-14. I'll go 20-14. Cleveland wins. I think the Colts will keep it competitive, but it's hard for me with missing as many guys as you're missing and Cleveland being pretty healthy, all things considered, and coming off a huge win against the best team in the NFC, arguably. That's going to be a tough chore for the Colts to take care of business. So I'm going to pick Cleveland in this game.
All right, sounds good. Before we get going, do you want to promote Bring the Juice at all?
Sure. Yeah. So I've been doing this thing since 2019, which is crazy to think about. It's been that long. But yeah, you can follow the channel Bring the Juice on basically anywhere you listen to podcasts, whether it's Spotify, whether it's Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, all that stuff. Just search Bring the Juice or just search Colts and you'll find us. And also on YouTube, that's kind of one of our main places we post a lot of stuff.
That's how I found you.
Yeah, exactly. You can just type in Bring the Juice Colts or something like that, and you'll find us there. And then, yeah, you can find us on X, I guess it's called now, not Twitter. I always call it Twitter. I always call it Twitter, but you can find us on there at BTJ Pod, also on Instagram, TikTok, all those places. And then you can find me on Instagram and also on X as well at CP Felger 55.
All right, cool. Well, always fun talking to you. Maybe hopefully the Browns improve their win streak against you to 2-0 or 2 games in a row, however you say it.
Yeah,
and
exactly.
We can turn it around because I've got tired of losing 3 straight to you.
Yep. I know it's been tough. We're kind of been in a tough rut the last few years. So we're trying to get back to our winning ways.
Yep.